Powered by Riverside FM.
Powered by Riverside.
Welcome to Unconventional Playbook, the UP. Hit that like and subscribe button. Keep the channel growing. You know, I couldn't wait to get online today. You know, my last post, I mentioned in my last pod, I should say, that we weren't going to make this platform about Caitlin Clark all the time. And I said, you know, these are the areas that we're going to cover the most. We're going to cover national sports. But, you know, my passion is the Minnesota Vikings. My passion is the Minnesota Timberwolves. So we're going to be more Minnesota focused. But at times we'll dabble. We'll color outside the lines a little bit. And we'll talk about some national sports topics. And there may be some days where we'll take some detours and just go a completely whole different direction. Like this is what this podcast is all about as it's growing. And who knows, down the line, things may change as we grow bigger, stronger, faster as a podcast. But this Caitlin Clark story just won't go away. I mean, over the weekend, it was a big story that she's off the Olympic team. And so I thought I would be remiss if I didn't dedicate a pod to it or cover it. And again, this is not going to be everyday Caitlin Clark, you know, because I think the topic can get a little bit exhausting, but I think it's really important. I think it's important to cover what's been going on with Caitlin Clark and this whole Olympic team, why she's being left off, what are they saying, and is it a big deal? Is it a big deal? I guess for me, it all depends on what your agenda is and what you want out of sports in general, and then what you want on the women's side of things. You know, when I look at the whole landscape of women's sports, and I'm going to start at the professional level rather than the amateur level, because I think the NCAA and women's basketball has grown big over the last few years. Gino Auriemma and all the great women's basketball coaches out there have really been trying to promote and grow the sport. But I want to take it to another level. I want to start the discussion at the professional level. And I want to ask all my UPers out there, all my unconventional playbookers out there that pay attention to women's sport, what's the biggest and best women's sport that's out there professionally? What's the most popular sport out there for women professionally, where women can make money off their brand? And I know in NCAA, NAIA, whatever you want to call it, now they've got the NIL stuff out there. So now you have female athletes that can make money off their likeness. Okay, we're going to exclude that. That's recently new. I'm talking about the professional side of things. Here in the States, what's the most popular pro women's sport? I don't know if there's a complete answer to that. I don't know many people that could just rattle off what the top 3 professional women's sports there are. That would be tough. I would argue it's probably soccer, the professional soccer league. So therein lies the question. What's most popular? Who's the most popular professional athlete out there on the female side of things? Let's start with male versus female on the smallest stage. When you look at every fall, ESPN, they will broadcast the Little League World Series. And I think it's a great watch. For those of you who have never watched the Little League World Series, in August, around about that time, they have some of the best Little League baseball players around. 11, 12-year-old kids vying for a spot in the Little League World Series held in Pennsylvania. It's great. They get to be on ESPN. They get to be interviewed. These kids and their coaches, they stay in the dorm. They get to bond with each other. They get to know each other over a couple of weeks of just playing baseball. And then the winner of the United States side of things will play the international team, whoever won on that side of things. And it's a huge broadcast. It's a huge moneymaker. It's a great watch. I remember that grew to be so big that on the women's side of things, or the girls' side of things, they tried to replicate that and have the Softball League World Series. Some of you probably didn't even know that existed and probably have never watched it. But it pales in comparison to the Little League World Series. And the boys pales in comparison. It's not even the same. Remember when they tried women's pro football? One of my closest friends tried to start a women's pro football league. And they had the backing. They had a lot of women out there that wanted to try it. I don't think anyone thought that it was going to supersede the NFL, but it just provided another avenue for females to get out there and compete in a sport that they love, playing football. Some of you probably had no idea that even existed, or someone was trying to attempt to start a league like that. That league came and went without any notoriety, paled in comparison to semi-pro men's football leagues. Then someone came up with the bright idea, hey, if we're going to have women's football, let's have them in bikinis or lingerie. Let's have a little TNA. Maybe that'll boost some ratings. And they called it the Lingerie League. You guys remember that? I believe that league is still going on. It's not called the Lingerie League anymore. I can't remember what the name of the league is, but it's still the same attire. So again, corporate sports America had to make sure that they let the female athletes know that they were female. And they slapped bikinis and lingerie on them. For anyone to take you seriously, you got to be wearing a bikini and you got to be wearing lingerie. You guys remember that league? I believe it's still going on today. One of the most popular female sports is soccer. Oh, the World Cup. Every year. I'm not even a soccer guy. But when the World Cup comes on, I watch. What an exciting stage. What a prestigious title to have if you're fortunate enough to win the World Cup. Remember back in the day, I can't remember what year it was. I'm not even going to front, but it's probably the last time that the USA won the World Cup on the women's side. I can't remember what year it was. I wasn't into soccer. I was a younger guy, but I remember the United States team in overtime or shootout, whatever you want to call it. I'm not even going to pretend like I'm a soccer expert, but I know that they were lining up and they were trying to get the ball past the goalie. And remember Brandy Chastain? She kicked the winning goal in, and the United States won the World Cup. And after they won the World Cup, the only thing that you heard about was after she kicked the ball into the goal to win the United States the gold medal, she took her shirt off. She had a sports bra underneath, but she took her shirt off. And that was what was talked about for months and months after the women's soccer team won the gold medal. They even made commercials about it. Remember when Brandy Chastain was playing foosball against two professional athletes on a ESPN commercial? I can't remember who she was playing against, but they let her score in foosball, and then they looked at her, and she was like, "What?" And they said to her, "Well, I thought you were going to take your shirt off." Again, even on the biggest stage, they got to let female athletes know that they're female. Even in those kinds of moments, they've got to do it. Remember the Dream Team, arguably the best Olympic basketball team ever assembled. Magic Johnson, Charles Barkley, Scottie Pippen, Larry Bird, Karl Malone, all of these great NBA basketball players. And yet, they added a college All-American from Duke who had yet to play a game in the NBA at all. Christian Laettner ended up being drafted by the Minnesota Timberwolves, had a really, really good career in the NBA. He found a way to be on that Olympic team, the Dream Team, arguably the best team ever assembled at the Olympics for pro men's basketball. See, on the men's side of things, they're so established that they've just got things figured out. They just got it figured out. On the women's side of things, and this whole Caitlin Clark tidal wave, you can look at the WNBA as a fledgling business. They're a startup. They're barely surviving. They're treading water. They're not making a profit. They're being held afloat by another entity, the NBA. So now that they have something come along that's pretty good, it's pretty popular. I mean, it's a tidal wave. They really don't understand, and they really don't get it. When I talk about Caitlin Clark, I get a lot of praise for supporting her, and I get a lot of backlash for supporting her. And the one thing I'm trying to say is, I'm not anti Caitlin Clark, obviously, but I'm not super pro Caitlin Clark either. I know it may sound like it. I just love good ball and people that can play, and she's a good baller and she can play. But what I am is a person that wants to see female sports be legitimate and legitimized. I want to see the best for the WNBA. I want to see the best for our Olympic team, because that's what's going to help grow the sport. I was listening to ESPN radio the other day, and Chris Canty and I believe her name is Michelle Smallman. They were discussing the whole Caitlin Clark thing and how she's left off the, Olympic team. And Smallman said, I just feel like this is a loss for women's sports. Just when we were starting to gain some traction, now we've got all this dialogue about Caitlin Clark getting targeted in the league, and now she's being left off the Olympic team. And I can't argue with it. I'm not saying that Caitlin Clark should even be on the team. You could argue that the players that are already on the team, that team is stacked. And the question becomes, if you put Caitlin Clark on the team, who would you take off the team? Well, couldn't you have said the same thing back when they were putting the dream team together? You mean to tell me that there weren't better players in the NBA than Christian Laettner? You can't tell me that they couldn't find another player in the league to take the place of Christian Laettner, an All-American from Duke? There were some fantastic players in the league. But somehow, some way, on the men's side of things, they found a way to do it. See, I've gotta forgive the WNBA. And I gotta show our Olympic committee who puts these teams together, I gotta show them some grace. Because on the women's side of things, there are very few times where a tidal wave like Caitlin Clark comes along. And if you've never had to deal with that, you just don't know how to deal with it. You fail on a public stage. It's almost like when a homicide or something happens in a small town and you have, one of these police stations that has one sheriff and one deputy, kind of like in Mayberry. If you ever watched the Andy Griffith show, you got Andy and then you got Barney Fife. Like they just don't know how to handle anything that's a significant crime. So they always have to resource out. This is the Olympic Committee for women's basketball. This is the WNBA. Caitlin Clark is a unique force that is coming into that league. And people are not handling it well because they don't know how. They weren't ready for it. So when I ask, is it a big deal that Caitlin Clark is left off? Listen, for all the Caitlin Clark fans and all the Caitlin Clark supporters, Caitlin Clark is going to have her time to participate in the Olympics. Because I told you in earlier podcasts of the UP, you can't stifle greatness. There was a time where blacks and people of color weren't allowed to play baseball. And there was many people that tried to put a damper on an influx of people of color playing the sport. That's fact. Look at where the sport is today. You can't stop it. No matter what you try to do to prevent it, when there's greatness out there, you can't stop it. There was a time where people of color were not allowed to play in the NBA. Can you imagine if that would have held up? And there were people that tried their hardest to get that stopped. Look at where the league is now. Can't stop it. I could go on and on and on and on. And I'm here to tell you, Caitlin Clark, no matter what they do to her, she's great, and her tidal wave won't be stopped. And I'm not saying that anything was done maliciously to keep her off the Olympic team, because I don't believe that it was. But here's what I'm going to tell you. Caitlin Clark will probably never say this out loud, but if I'm her, I'm going to wait to go to the Olympics. When another 4 years comes and she's back up for being considered again, the league's going to be in a different spot. Not only because of her, but a big reason because of her. A big part of it is going to be because of Caitlin Clark. If I were her, I wouldn't be too quick to want to go into that locker room this time around. And I think there are some people behind the scenes that have probably thought of that. Because there are members on that team that don't want her on there. So just the whole collaboration of Caitlin Clark within the framework of the team that was picked, I don't think they would show her a lot of grace. And so she's going to have her time and she's going to have her moment to be a part of the Olympic team. And I believe she is going to be a multi-gold medal winner. It's unfortunate that the USA Olympic Committee can't see the benefits of having Caitlin as a part of that team. Where the men, they saw the benefits of having Christian Laettner as a part of that team. They weren't worried about Christian Laettner's playing time or how that was going to be perceived. And you can't tell me that Christian Laettner wasn't popular coming out of Duke, because I remember those days back in 1991. He was very popular coming out of Duke. And no one was worried about his fan base or how much playing time he was going to get. They just wanted his face to be on that Olympic team. See, the men have it figured out. There was just no hesitation. They had to make a decision. And you can't tell me that there wasn't a deserving NBA player that didn't deserve to be on that team in place of Christian Laettner. But somehow, some way, it's different now for the women. You've got Caitlin Clark and you've got 12 really good players on the roster. And, you know, the excuses I'm hearing, she's not a top 12 player in the NBA. She's not one of the best players in the NBA. There have been players on his team that have gone through the training camps and all this, every excuse in the book to omit her from that team, which is fine. I don't think there's any evil intent behind it. I don't think she was excluded to be malicious. But I do think people tend to overthink things. And you could have analysis paralysis and not do the right thing sometimes. So I know a lot of people wanted me to comment on the Caitlin Clark thing and the whole Olympic thing. And again, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about it. It was a big story over the weekend. So again, this is not going to be Caitlin Clark podcast everyday type thing, but it is a big story and it is a relevant story. And I stand on my soapbox where I say my only agenda as a person that loves sports, I want to see equality in sports. I coach college women's basketball and I see the dedication, the hard work, and the sacrifices my women make to represent our university. And I want them to have, after they leave my university, I want them to have opportunities to go elsewhere and have things be equal and right. And so this is my platform to be able to talk about it. I don't know how many ears it'll hit, but when we have these topics, I'm going to stand on it. This has been Unconventional Playbook. Again, just interesting takes on the Caitlin Clark thing. I just had to talk about it. Looking forward to adding Patrick Buchanan, the Minnesota sports guru, to the broadcast this week. Can't wait to have him on. I know he's excited. It's going to add a lot to the program. Get out and enjoy your Monday. Weather is nice in Wisconsin and Minnesota. Great day to be outside. This has been the UP. I will see you when I see you.
Powered by Riverside.